Hey book lovers, Kaylee here and welcome back to the Enchanted Library. Recently, Hailey and Bookland posted a video for a promotion of an upcoming book, and while I wasn't into the book, I actually really loved the idea for the video itself. And I thought, considering my birthday is right around the corner, it would be a great excuse to do this type of video because, as you can tell from the title above, I'm going to be talking all about my baby photos and book recommendations. So I had my mom drop off a few of our old photo albums from way back in the day, and I had a lot of fun going through them all and figuring out what pictures instilled a certain inspiration for a type of book. So without further ado, let's look at those photos. So we're kind of going to go in chronological order because the first picture here is from when I was very young, and as you can see there, it is me with my brother. And it's possible that you can't quite tell what it is that we're playing with, but that is an original Ghostbusters set. Because we were both really into Ghostbusters when we were kids, and my brother actually got a whole bunch of Ghostbusters things for Christmas that year, and I really wanted to play with the toys, but he didn't really want me to. He never wanted me to play with his toys, and I don't know why. I wasn't going to break them or anything, but I wanted to capture some ghosts, so I got my little kit out and figured I would do my best. So I figured with this picture and the fact that I was playing with Ghostbusters toys, I think that it is just perfect to recommend My Plain Jane by the Lady Janies. This one is a more recent read for me, and it is a retelling of Jane Eyre but with a paranormal twist. And the paranormal twist is that there are ghost hunters. So when this book was pitched for Owl Crate, they said that it was Jane Eyre meets Ghostbusters, and I just figured that this book was too perfect not to choose for this picture. If you haven't heard of this book yet, it covers 3 points of views, one from Jane, one from Charlotte, and one from Alexander. Jane is Jane Eyre, and she is a mistress at a boarding school, and she wants to go away and become a governess and fall in love, get married, all of that, but she is hiding a secret. And her best friend Charlotte, who is Charlotte Bronte, she is in this story as a character, which is so cool. She loves her best friend Jane, and she doesn't realize that she has a secret, but she is a writer, so she wants to tell her friend Jane's story. And then we have Alexander, who is a ghost hunter, and he comes across Jane and Charlotte in a very interesting circumstance and basically needs Jane's help because of her secret. It was just a fun, interesting read. There's a lot of breaking the fourth wall, so if you're into that sort of a story where the writers are sort of poking fun at the story alongside with you, I think that this would be a really interesting one to pick up. The next picture that I have here is of my brother and I again. We were such goofballs. We were fairly close as children because we had no other cousins or anything our age, so we basically just had ourselves and obviously our own separate friends. But for family events and things like that, it was always us against the world pretty much, and I just feel like this encapsulates us so well. Even to this day, we just take goofy pictures and we just have so much fun with it, and I love my brother so much, and I figured I needed to find a book that sort of encompassed the love of siblings. And I figured one of my favorite brother-sister siblings are the Blake siblings from The 100 by Cass Morgan. In this story, Bellamy is the older brother of Octavia, and he is very protective of her because in this world they live in space and basically need to control population, so no one was allowed to have a second child, but in the Blake family they did. So Octavia has always been hidden, and Bellamy always considered it his duty to take care of her. So they are very close in this story, and I just love their sibling relationship, and even though it's not the most main plot of this story, I just find that it's a really good piece of it that brings a lot of heart to the story. This story is all about this group living in space, and they think that the world is uninhabitable anymore because of nuclear fallout, but there is something that happens on the spacecraft that causes all of their air supply to start depleting. So they have to figure out how they can survive. And the way that they do that is for any of the criminals who are under 18, they actually ship down to Earth to see if it's inhabitable. So there are 100 teenagers who get sent down to Earth, and Octavia and Bellamy are two of those children, and it's just all about how they try to survive on this desolated world that they actually aren't the only people on that planet. So I really enjoy this story. Anytime that there is a hiatus between seasons of the 100, I always have to reread this series, and I had to pick this for the sibling love. Now my next book recommendation actually has two pictures of mine that kind of work, so I'm just going to throw them both up here because one is a little bit more true to form than the other, but I'll let you see the two of them here. So obviously that one on top is me as a very young child on just a toy horse pretty much, and then the one below is me on an actual horse, if you couldn't tell. I loved horses as a kid and I didn't get to ride them nearly enough, but I absolutely loved them. And I figured the perfect book for this would be Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. And this is a classic tale, I'm sure everybody has heard of it, but it's basically just following along the story of Black Beauty, who is a horse who has always felt loved around its owners and the family that it was a part of, but tragedy strikes and then it ends up being shipped to different homes where not everybody is as loving as the original home from which it came. So there's cruelty, there's betrayal, there's heartbreak, but there's also love and endearing moments, and it's just a really amazing story, and if you haven't read it yet, I would really recommend it. The next picture that I have here is a perfect excuse to talk about one of my all-time favorite books, and as you can see, I am here on a balance beam, and that immediately made me think acrobatics, and I had to think of a character who loves acrobatics, and that was easy because it's Yelena from Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder. I read this book at least once a year since I was like 16 or 17, so that's been a long time, and I absolutely love this story. It's got a fierce female lead, and it's got a corrupt government, a really interesting magic system, a slow burn romance, and just a lot of action and so much story that is told in this one book alone, let alone the entire series. So I recommend this book to anybody, and there is, I will say, I have seen this on shelves in the YA section before, but I really don't agree with that because there are some mature themes that happen in this book that I think should stay on the adult fantasy shelf. But if you feel like you're okay for that type of maturity, then definitely pick this book up. I absolutely love it. It's got assassins, it's got subterfuge, it's so great. I love this book so much, and like I said, I had to pick it as one of the books that I recommend, and this picture just worked out perfectly. And the next picture here, you can just see my little pea head poking out of that little pop-up astronaut, but space, hello. Let's talk about some sci-fi, and I ended up picking one that I haven't read in a very long time, but it's from an author that I recently rediscovered through a new fantasy series that she started, but her sci-fi series is Avalon, and that's by Mindy Arnett. Now, I would also say, for a recommendation for this book, if you really loved Firefly, this book is going to be up your alley. I will say, while I was reading this, I found it very hard to think of these new characters and not think of the original group from Firefly, but it was still such a really fun ride of a story. This is all about a kid named Jeff and his crew of mercenary teenagers trying to survive in space. They'll take pretty much whatever job is given to them because Jeff is trying to save up to repurchase his family ship, the Avalon. He really just wants to make a good life for him and his sister and his friends who have now become also family. But then they get sent on a mission that's a little bit more dangerous than they had anticipated, but it's going to be best in the long run for them to do it, and there's just so much that does happen in this story. But I figured, again, this would be a good book to recommend alongside with this picture because, again, it is kind of about siblings, and it's in space, and this is me and my brother with his head cut off in the picture. Putting our heads in little spacemen pop-up things, so this was perfect. Now, this next picture, look at that mug. I remember this day so vividly. My aunt came to babysit my brother and I, and she had brought watermelon with her, and she ended up bringing us into our backyard, and we had a watermelon eating contest. The entire patio was a mess. Like, it was just, everything was everywhere. We had watermelon all over the place, seeds spat anywhere, and when my mom came home, she wasn't too pleased with my aunt, but that just made it even more hilarious. So when I think of this picture, I think of a really fun summer and just a refreshing day in general, and I wanted to think of a book that brought back those same types of memories. And I had to go with a Canadian classic, and that is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. If you have not read this book and you are Canadian, if you have not read this book and you are not Canadian, where have you been? This entire series is just heartfelt, heartwarming. It's just everything you need to just cuddle up and be happy, and I just cannot recommend this book enough. It's all about an orphan named Anne Shirley, Anne with an E, and her coming to the Cuthbert home under the premise that she was supposed to be a boy and help out on the farm. But then she ends up instilling herself into the hearts of Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert, and it's just, I absolutely adore this story so, so much. This copy of mine is probably one of the most ratty books that I own because I read it when I was 9 or 10. I think it was 9, and it just came with me everywhere, so I cannot recommend this enough. It follows Anne's life from the time that she is like 11 until she's 16, and then there are more stories that go on from there until she is an adult, and I can't say enough good things about this story. This next picture I think is the perfect follow-up for that last recommendation because in it I am reading Anne of Green Gables. And the story behind this picture is my grandparents live on a creek in my hometown, and they have a dock on the water. And on that dock is where I learned to fish, where my brother learned to fish. It is where we just wanted to go all of the time. We take kayaks out there, and it's just a really fun day anytime that we go out there. And in this picture in particular, there are a bunch more pictures from this day, and where I am is sort of off on my own, but if you were to look at my view, it's basically my whole family and my grandparents all fishing and hanging out, and I'm sort of just sitting there enthralled in my book. So I had to think to myself, what character from a book is the epitome of a bookworm and just will do whatever she can to read a book and not necessarily pay full attention to everything else that's going on around her, and I had to say Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I mean, when you think of the classic bookworm, that is her. I almost said Jo from Little Women, but I still feel like Jo would be participating in the fishing and everything and then write about it when she gets home later, but I think that Elizabeth would just sit under a tree and read her book calmly while everybody else is going about their business. Pride and Prejudice is obviously a classic, and some people I definitely understand if that's not your taste in literature, but I absolutely adore Jane Austen's writing. I love how forward she is with thinking about women's rights and what they can and can't do, and how strongly she felt about it. I love her humor, I love her protagonists, her antagonists. I love so much about how she writes, or how she wrote, I should say. But it is one of the classic love stories of the age, and I kind of wish that I was Elizabeth Bennet. So if my Mr. Darcy is out there, hi! This next picture, when I came across it, I couldn't not include it because I just look like a total goofball. And I think you can agree. But this is me in a nightgown, and what I have there as a mustache is actually a piece of our stair railing that came out. And I just thought it looked like a mustache, so I put it on my face, I put on my beret, and I just tried to act French. So when I was thinking of a book to go along with this picture, I had to think of Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. This story follows Anna, who is entering school, but she is really happy with where she's at in Atlanta. She's got a crush that's on the verge of becoming something a little bit more. She's got a best friend, and things are going well. But she ends up being shipped off to boarding school in Paris, and she ends up having to refigure out how she can be in charge of her life in a completely foreign place. And in that time that she is in Paris attending boarding school, she ends up meeting a boy named Etienne, and they end up sort of hitching up a romance, but it's a little bit of a risky one because Etienne already has a girlfriend, so that's a little sketchy. But when I thought of that picture, this is the very first book that came to mind, and it is just a light, fluffy contemporary, and I just had a lot of fun reading this. I do remember that, and I had a lot of fun just goofing off in front of the camera on that day. I remember vividly. Now, my last picture here, I had to be typically Canadian as well and include something from winter, and this is a snowman with a bunch of snowball ammo in his little arm. I'm not sure if you can even tell, but I picked this because A, it's quintessentially Canadian, it's snow, and I'm bundled up, and I'm making a snowman, all that, but also because what you can't see is way in the background of our backyard, my brother and I had made a whole snowman army. We had snow tanks, we had snow, like, military. It was insane. But the inspiration for our snow squad came from this comic, and that is There's Treasure Everywhere, classic Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson. And if you have not had the great fortune of reading Calvin and Hobbes, you don't know what you're missing. These comics are part of my childhood. My brother and I were obsessed with the Calvin and Hobbes comics. And in this one in particular, Calvin and Hobbes, his little imaginary friend, end up building this whole army of snowmen, and the snowmen come to life in his imagination and just wreak havoc everywhere, and it's just hilarious. But also everything that they say, all of the stories, all of the sort of final opinions and thoughts are really well said and well put and teach you something. So Bill Watterson is just absolutely amazing, and I only have a few of these collections, but I would love to have all of them because, again, it was part of my childhood, and I just loved that winter when my brother and I kept going out and making all of these snowmen and having our own little battles in the backyard, trying to be like Calvin and Hobbes. So I just had to choose this as well, even though it's a little unorthodox because it's not technically a book, it's a comic. I just think that I couldn't not include this one. Alright, and I guess I will end it there. I had so much fun going through all of my old pictures and coming up with book recommendations based on them. There were so many that I wanted to include, but if you guys are interested to see more recommendation type videos and that sort of thing, leave a comment down below so then that way I can sort of include that in my rotation for next time. Also, let me know your thoughts on any of the books that I recommended. Have you read them? Are you going to add them to your TBR now? I'm really curious. And while you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more videos. I put out new ones every weekend and then also on Tuesdays sometimes. So just be sure to click the bell notification so then that way you do not miss a video. And until next time, keep reading.